Ladies and gentlemen, you've waited patiently for the main card tonight, and now we have it coming in at 6'1". He's spiritual. He's got all the religious symbols tattooed on his body, but does he have God on his side? Russell Brand! And in the right corner, coming in at 6'2", he hasn't had a veggie in years. He might burst into tears, but don't call him a softie. It's Jordan Peterson! Let's get into the main event! Guys, welcome to Unapologetic. I hope you're having fun. I had to do a little homage to UFC because we have a gender debate, a gender battle happening on our screens, and that's between Russell Brand and Jordan Peterson. This video came out, now has 1.3 million views at the time that we're watching it, probably way more by the time you're seeing this. So let's get into it. Obviously, I love Russell Brand. You guys know I love Russell Brand. I also like Jordan Peterson. Taylor loves Jordan Peterson.
I love Jordan Peterson. I like Russell Brand.
Yeah, he's like, I like Russell Brand. So we have our sides of the table here. Obviously, this is a gender debate, so you know where we stand on gender, and I have a feeling maybe Jordan Peterson is going to be more on our side of things when it comes to this back and forth. But let's get into it. Let's watch it and see what we find.
Free with me, Russell Brand.
The things that I wanted to start with, given Elon Musk's recent takeover of Twitter, is whether he is a distinct and discrete category of a billionaire. How is he different? How is he the same? And how will Elon Musk's position at Twitter alter your position on Twitter?
Well, that remains to be seen. I'm still banned, so that hasn't changed. I mean, he's suggested that he might reinstate Trump. Whether or not that means he'd reinstate me is a matter of question. It isn't obvious to me that the people who run the social media networks know exactly how to regulate them with any degree of utility. You know, I've probably read 100,000 comments online, or maybe more, and I've tried to read them with a psychologist's eye. And there are some things going on online that are, I think, that actually pose a threat to the integrity of the culture itself. The biggest problem that I can see is that the large online platforms allow anonymous troll demons to rampage through society with no cost to themselves. And I can identify these people quite accurately now. This will make a number of the people who are watching and listening uncomfortable because they'll be in the list of people who do this sort of thing. So the first...
Anonymous troll demons. I don't know how I feel about the phraseology there, I guess. I can take the anonymous troll part. The demon part is really interesting, and I have a feeling we're going to get more into why he would characterize somebody like that. I'm curious how, and probably should get into this discussion now, should people be allowed to be anonymous on the internet? I'm leaning towards yes, that's within your rights to remain anonymous on an entity like the internet because it's just a matter of personal choice. And there are certainly people all across the board who like to say things on the internet that are particularly crass or something that they wouldn't say in public to somebody or to somebody's face, and they end up saying that on the internet. But I have a feeling I'm leaning towards it's within their right to remain anonymous on the internet. And I don't know, Taylor, what do you think about that?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of utility in allowing people to be anonymous online. I mean, we have people in our Discord server who are able to open up and say things and, process things in a healthy way that they wouldn't be comfortable, sharing certain things that they've been through or parts of themselves with their name behind it online. And like we get so much interesting, fascinating content through Reddit of people being anonymous. And there's plenty of parody accounts that are hilarious. And there's a level of anonymity to that. Or just a lot of people like, Vocal Distance is, I think he's kind of out there now, but for a while he was anonymous. TikTok, Libs of TikTok is anonymous. And so I definitely don't think that there's inherently something wrong. But I think when you have a situation where you're deliberately being a troll, where you're out there for mischief to sow discord and using an anonymity as a sort of way to like amplify your negative effects, that's where I think it's problematic.
Yeah, I mean, where you give way to good things, like people being able to share parts of themselves they wouldn't normally share, you also give way to the bad, which is people feeling emboldened to share things that they maybe shouldn't share.
Thing is, they have an anonymous name. The second thing is the anonymous name usually has something psychologically significant about it in a very negative direction. So it's self-denigrating, or it's demonic, or it's otherwise offensive, and purposefully so. And then the people who are utter cowards, likely to be narcissists and Machiavellians, resentful people sitting in their basement at home, dwelling on their misery and doing everything they can to spew toxicity out into the world. Alone in their bedrooms, they're just isolated people who aren't causing any trouble. But as soon as they multiply themselves millions of times using this incredible, powerful computer technology, they're not even human anymore. In my estimation, they're literally a demonic force. And I mean that in a technical sense, right?
He's lost me. I'm not going to lie. I'm not going to lie.
He's lost me on this. This isn't one of my favorite Jordan Peterson takes, honestly.
Yeah, when he says, first of all, they're no longer human. Obviously, that's false. They still are human individuals. Now, you can say that because they're coming at you in such force, and there are so many of them, it feels like something that is no longer human. But it still is just a bunch of people on the internet. And saying it's a demonic force in a technical sense, I don't know what that even means. What is the technical sense of being?
Yeah, I think you at least need. I think all of this. It's like, okay, give us an example, because it's very strange and very abstract speaking, and I just I normally can sift through what he's trying to say in that, but he's kind of losing me here. I think maybe there's a sense in which, when people are in a mob, for example, you have the mob mentality, as people say, and mob behavior. And then you could say that you're not acting as an individual human person when you are swept up in something like that. And so maybe to some degree, that's what he's saying. And then you could characterize that as a demonic force. And we know Jordan Peterson thinks mythologically, and that just makes sense to him. So anyways, but yeah, I wish he would lay this out a little more clearly. And also I think the video is about to take a big shift in a very specific conversation, and heretofore we're not really getting into that. So.
Yeah, we're not in the crux here. But yeah, you know me. I don't like things like calling something demonic or satanic or evil, or saying something is fully good or fully bad, stuff like that. So we'll see.
You and I aren't exactly you and I in this conversation, because we're amplified hundreds of times or thousands of times or hundreds of thousands of times. And so we're not just human, we're androids in some sense, operating in a virtual space. And these online trolls have that power because they have access to an audience that they would never gather by their own merits. They are saying things that are derisive and inflammatory, and that would absolutely 100% get them punched if they ever said it in public. Imagine that there's a hierarchy of unconstrained people, and there's a variety of people who are very unconstrained, but in normal social discourse would be able to keep themselves under control because of the controls that are there in normal social discourse. You lift those controls and they just go off. And so that's what we're seeing online, and that has to be stopped. I think the large tech companies should be required to put in know your customer laws. They should ban anonymous accounts, but in this way. Imagine that you have a section for comments where it's real human beings that are verified, and you have another section underneath that's for anonymous troll demons. And if you want to go visit their hell and see what their resentful minds are spewing into the public landscape, then you can. Otherwise, you stick to the real human beings.
I have to think about whether or not that is something that I actually support. I don't know that I do. I think we already have that in a sense, in that social media platforms have verification processes where you can become verified and get your little blue check. Instagram has it, YouTube has it, Twitter has it, and the like.
But they're not transparent, and they're not just simply to verify that you're an actual human being, which I would support it if they were. Right.
So fix that mechanism and fix that process for verifying people and making sure that it is used not in an equitable way, but in a way that promotes equality. So that's would be more what I'm looking for. I still think of so many accounts that I know that are anonymous that aren't doing what these troll demons that he refers to are doing. So do those people deserve to have that anonymity? Should we usher in the future of the internet where everybody has to be who they actually are? I don't know. I think it would make people definitely make better decisions when it comes to what they say on the internet, but it's also not within, I feel like it's not my place to tell you have to be a verifiable person on the internet.
No, I don't think you should have to be
Right.
verified, but I do think that if you want, there should be a very simple way to like to mark yourself as yourself online. That, hey, this is me, this is my name, it's really me. I verified it somehow, and I'm standing by what I say. You know, so I can't be
Sure.
mischaracterized, or I can't be, so no one can impersonate me.
But in a way, isn't that already happening? Like, you know, an account is anonymous by looking at the profile picture and looking at the name on it. So don't we already have those markers in some way, shape, or form? You mean like an actual verify check?
I mean, I think that would be like if you wanted to have a systematic way to do that, that's built into every platform, so that there's just no question. I mean, there's always ways to game systems and stuff, but I think that would generally be a good thing
Right.
for social media. That would mitigate a lot of this anonymity abuse that we're seeing. But I don't think you need to have a separate section where anyone who's on an anonymous account can't participate in the conversation at the same level as someone who has a check.
Yeah, that's where I'm leaning to. Well, we might revisit that at a later date.
And I don't know if Musk and the other people who are running the big social media networks understand the pathology that's associated with this online commentary well enough to control it. So we'll see.
What I would like to draw your attention to, still sort of within the broad rubric of looking at Musk's acquisition of Twitter and how that may play out and how it may affect you personally. I was myself struck with, I think the tweet that you were banned for was sort of like commenting on Elliot Page. How do we prioritize compassion, kindness, love? And can't this basic palette of principles prevent us from getting into conflict around these ideas?
Well, it isn't obvious to me that love can be reduced to compassion at all.
I can see where Russell's take is already going to land because we all know Russell. Russell's like, how can we be more compassionate? How can we be more loving? And how can we achieve the things that we want to achieve and move to a better future while also doing all of those things? And he seems to have an aversion to attacking people, which I think most people do, but also viewing people or discussing people in a negative light is one of his things that he doesn't like when other people do. So I think that's where we're going to go with this conversation.
At all. Because for a variety of reasons. First of all, I think love is a multidimensional virtue. And there's many other virtues than compassion. Think about it this way, Russell. Imagine that the purest expression of compassion is the love of a mother for a true infant. We could really think about that as true compassion, 100% compassion. And the reason for that is that if you have an infant from birth to, say, 6 months old, nothing the infant does is ever to be questioned. The proper response to the infant is whatever the cause of their distress, you immediately prioritize its reduction.
Sure.
But then as the child starts to develop, and as soon as it becomes capable of its own voluntary movement, as soon as it becomes ambulatory, its nervous system starts to change, of course. But then there are other elements that have to be introduced into the relationship to make it a relationship of proper love. And some of that's judgment, which is often considered antithetical to compassion.
Let's break that down because he's using a lot of big words. Okay, so you have a baby, right? Your newborn baby is going to cry and be upset on several occasions. And your job as a parent is just to give them complete love and compassion, try to figure out what's wrong, fix that so that subsides for them. But let's say you have a 4-year-old and your 4-year-old is crying and screaming because they want to eat cookies for dinner. Suddenly, you're going to have to inject a little bit of judgment on that rather than just saying, I'm going to do whatever I can in this loving, compassionate way to stop this person from crying. Here are the cookies. You're going to go, no, we can't do cookies right now. This is going to be better for you if we eat vegetables and meats for dinner. And you do that with your 4-year-old. And that is still love. That's what he's saying. So Russell's saying, well, why don't you approach these people on the internet with love and compassion in the way that you speak to them? And he's saying, well, you have to define what love and compassion means.
And some of it's encouragement, and encouragement has a fair bit of judgment in it, because when you're encouraging someone, you're not exactly being compassionate for who they are. You're doing what you can to facilitate who they could be. And what you're doing constantly when you're encouraging someone is prioritizing who they could be over who they are. And that's an element of judgment. And that judgment, you might say, if you're not thinking about it precisely from the religious perspective, is your own ability to decide which parts of you should go. Then the question is, are you compassionate for who you are, or are you compassionate for who you could be? And the second is just as important, or maybe more important.
And when that's applied to the self, I can see that the requirement for this judgment, the great success you've had in, clean your room, stand up straight, these kind of edicts offered to young men or young people who require discipline. I can see the success of that. But Jordan, I feel that when it becomes an outward strike of like, this person should not have done this thing, this is the impact these actions will have on the culture, this will lead to this kind of denigration, this will lead to decisions that are, in my view, palpably wrong. I feel that this is where we have to redress an imbalance around compassion. I feel that Elliot Page should be able to do whatever Elliot Page wants to do, and that my only role is to say, I recognise that I don't understand, and why would I understand? There are less obvious things that you could never understand about me.
Pause. Interesting. Okay, so there's a lot of ways to go about this, right? Jordan Peterson has been known to not necessarily, I don't want to say go after somebody like Elliot Page, but criticize somebody like Elliot Page, who used to be Ellen Page and is now transitioned to be a man. And Jordan Peterson saying it's wrong that you're promoting this sort of lifestyle towards a younger audience who are looking to you as some sort of role model, and you are going to harm them in the reproduction and the pushing of this sort of ideology. So an outward strike. He's not telling himself that I need to get better. He's looking at you and going, you need to get better based on what my view is of better. And Russell Brand has a problem with that. It's interesting because you have to think about when that's the right thing to do and when that's the wrong thing to do. Certainly the words that are coming from Jordan Peterson's mouth are probably not going to enter the ears of Elliot Page, and Elliot Page is going to be like, you know what? Because Jordan Peterson told me that was wrong, I now realize that was wrong. So if that's not effective, does that mean you should stop with the criticism and stop with the outward striking? I don't know. Russell Brand, if you watch his YouTube channels, he talks about corporations and what they do wrong. He talks about like the globalist system that's being pushed forth right now, the World Economic Forum, which, if you read into that, is a direct criticism of people and is an outward strike as to what they should or should not be doing. Now, he does leave a lot of the conversations open-ended, but in listening to him, you can sort of tell where his ideas lie and where his opinions lie on these particular types of people. So at what point does it move out of love and compassion into an outward strike on somebody?
Yeah, and does Russell Brand draw the line for an outward strike at other individuals?
Right.
Because he's very outspoken about corporations and elites and that stuff, but I think I've seen him use individuals as examples.
Yes.
But he's never, to my knowledge, gone after someone in particular.
Right.
And so I guess it's a question of like, is that an acceptable tactic or an acceptable use of force in the culture war? If you're, in your mind, I'm trying to prevent harm by going after someone, by confronting them in the public square over their use of their platform to promote what I perceive to be a harmful ideology that is causing young children to go down a path of gender transition, and which we know all the negative effects that can go around that if this is becoming what's normalized and left unchallenged. So do I just leave these people unchallenged? I'm someone who's on relatively equal footing, or like if I believe this is causing harm, I have a platform. I need to stand up and speak out against it, which I could see is where Jordan Peterson is coming from. And we can talk about whether the way in which he did that was appropriate or whether he overstepped. And I think that's going to be a spectrum of disagreement on how forceful you should be. Right. But to make a blanket rule that you can never confront someone in public individually or call them out individually, I think is a silly idea, and I think it's a little bit, like butterflies and rainbows. Like we can solve the world's problems without ever having to confront individuals. And I'm not saying I don't want to put words in his mouth, but that attitude feels a little weak sauce to me.
Yeah, it seems like the crux of this debate are, when does it go from attacking an idea to attacking a person? And Jordan's like, I want to attack the ideas and go after the people who are perpetuating the ideas. And Russell Brand seems to be in the camp of, I just want to come after the ideas.
They're less evident and obvious. And for me, the basic principle of kindness and compassion is going to be my guide when dealing with Elliot Page and when posting something about Elliot Page. I do have recourse to the idea of, what do I want Elliot Page to feel? Happy, accepted. That's what I want Elliot Page to feel. And if there are aspects of that I don't understand, then I'm willing to take the hit.
When you think about your behavior on your YouTube channel, you're spending a lot of time in public criticism, and going after large corporations, going after those who are engaged in fascist collusion. And I think rightly so. I think that you're an extremely useful voice in that regard, and you're a critical voice. And, you're a critical comedic voice, which is a good kind of critical voice and not exactly compassionate, right? Because you're also using creativity on the humor side to make your point, and you're doing it in a playful way. And I think that playful criticism is the hallmark of the master critic. And I think the joker and the jester in that regard are master critics. But that's not compassion, right? That's a different virtue. And often it's very, very pointed. You do act as a social critic in many, many ways, and you do leaven it with comedy, and I think that's extraordinarily appropriate. It's part of what's given you such a broad voice, and that criticism is absolutely necessary. Now, let's speak about Elliot Page more specifically. So the first thing I'd like to bring up is the fact that in the UK, the Tavistock Clinic was recently closed, and that was the biggest clinic doing gender transformation surgery that operated in the British world. 1,000 of the 19,000 kids have now launched a lawsuit for medical malpractice. And when Elliot Page went online and showed off his or her new chest, she or he got 1.7 million Instagram likes. So then the question is, okay, compassion. Well, I think Elliot Page stepped over the line from victim to perpetrator, because when girls hit puberty, their negative emotion spikes and they develop bodily image problems. Because neurotic, and that would be negative emotional experience for women, is extremely tightly tied to body image. And so if you're a girl who is undergoing the hormonal changes that are going to elevate your negative emotion, which is what happens at puberty, you're going to be focused on body image. And if you're an unpopular girl and you're awkward socially, the probability that you're going to think something's wrong with your body is almost 100% if you're female.
I want to go back to something he said earlier, and this is the question of when do we cross the line from victims to perpetrators? And that's very interesting to me because for all intents and purposes, Elliot Page or Ellen Page, whatever you want to say, is a victim of ideology. So she was a particularly vulnerable person, struggled with sense of self, struggled with probably awareness and body image issues and maybe hormonal imbalances. It could be a host of different things. And found this sort of ideology for gender transition and thought, that's what I'm going to do and that's what's going to make myself more comfortable. Goes down that rabbit hole, just like any other child who's going through it right now in our country or any other country has. And we view those children as victims. But because Elliot Page did so in the public eye, and because Elliot Page now endorses it after having done it, we view that person as a perpetrator. So it's interesting that I can lean on both sides of this because I feel like the criticism of the big players in this, like Elliot Page, is necessary in order to get the information to people who will not have that information otherwise. It's going to lead to the movements that bring about the Tavistock clinics getting shut down, the legislation that's now being brought about in states like Tennessee. So how you go about criticizing those people is another question. But is it necessary? I kind of feel like it is necessary.
Yeah, I agree. And when you have the choice, it's one thing if you want to do this in your private life and this is the best way that you have found to deal with your gender dysphoria or whatever it may be. But when you make yourself an activist in this and you are clearly an avatar of the ideology and you're acting in that capacity, then I can no longer distinguish between like criticizing your ideas and criticizing you. Right. And so a criticism of you is criticizing the ideas that you are essentially possessed by and made yourself an avatar of. And that doesn't mean, and I think that we say whereas online, you don't need to go out of your way to be mean or cruel or cast aspersions on a person as a person. I think you can usually tell when you listen to somebody whether you can criticize them forcefully, but still be respectful of their dignity as a human being, and respectful of, hey, you on an individual level, you can do whatever you want, but here's where I'm criticizing you in the capacity of your pushing this ideology that is harmful, and I'm trying to prevent that harm.
Right. It's like I'm trying to think of a benign example of this, because obviously if we're going to talk about gender, we're talking about the most extreme debate that many of us are having. Let's think about stuff that people argue about all the time, like diet. A person who, you could even use Michaela Peterson or Jordan Peterson as an example here. Maybe we should step outside of that. But a person who goes, like the Liver King, okay? He was having problems with his body, regulating his body, whatever. Now he eats all this raw meat and he has a whole raw food diet or whatever that he promotes to people and has a whole YouTube channel about and all this other BS. And he puts that out to people and says, this is what I do. Okay. Well, okay, you've brought your advice for yourself, what you did individually, public. And this, much like what Elliot Page did, said, this worked for me, therefore it will work for other people, therefore we need to advocate for other people. And plenty of people look at somebody like the Liver King and go, I don't know if your diet's fully healthy. And I would like to criticize the advice that you are giving to other people and the lifestyle that you are promoting to other people. Nobody's up in arms about him getting criticism. Nobody is coming to bat and saying, how dare you criticize somebody for a lifestyle choice that they made that has helped them. Nobody says a word. So we go to gender, which of course is a totally different debate, but is still a debate of lifestyle and treatment and just a
harm.
In harm, yeah. So why is it so abhorrent to criticize the people who are promoting that? For me, it's like that sounds pretty similar. And we can probably think of other benign examples where we're perfectly fine criticizing people for what they do and for what they promote out on the internet. Look at all these YouTubers who get into scandals for promoting dangerous things with young people, like the Tide Pod Challenge or the Cinnamon Challenge or all these different things. And you come after them and you say, how dare you do this for millions and millions of views? You have young people watching you. They're impressionable. And now they're going to go on to do the same thing. And they even go as far as having these social media platforms ban those videos, which we can debate whether or not is a good or a bad thing, but that's fine. And nobody gets upset about that. So why is the same approach not taken with gender?
So I can see what makes you angry about it. It's your analysis and it's your opinion that it's a powerful influencer and it's going to lead people to make decisions that are going to be detrimental to their lives. But the evident and palpable anger, I feel, diminishes your position because now anger is in the conversation. I think you offer a great deal that is valuable and necessary, but I feel beyond the value and necessity of honesty, authenticity, and information that is underwritten by data and experience. I feel that it creates more opposition to approach a matter like this in the manner that you have done. What are we going to anchor ourselves to ultimately, Jordan, navigating this space? Are we going to be participants in creating more and more ossified and oppositional camps, or are we going to create cartilage between us so that we can move between a room that Jordan Peterson is in and a room that Elliot Page is in and say, look, I believe in love, and I know it's complicated. I think you're beautiful and full of love. I really believe in that. And then when I sort of hear people being dismissive of you, it upsets me.
I agree with Russell here. So here's where we go. We're going to go back and forth in between these two guys. And it's interesting to just hear two highly intelligent people go back and forth on something that they may disagree on. But what is the most effective for people listening and breaking the barrier of what they believe is compassion and is still expressing the views that Jordan Peterson has, the critical views, but without the anger. That's probably the most successful way that you're going to have a conversation with somebody and you're going to change their mind. However, if you want more people to hear your message and you want that message to go farther, our society tends to like when you get a little angry and you get a little passionate about the things. And the lines between anger and passion, we can tell, have been very much blurred because a lot of people would view things like the BLM riots as not anger, but passion, or January 6th as not anger, but passion. So the lines of that have been blurred tremendously. But when you are trying to get through to somebody, anger is certainly not the way. That's the way to get somebody to dig their heels into whatever it is that you're criticizing. And we know that. Just try it with a kid. Get really angry with a kid about what they're doing, and they'll either continue to do it or they'll do it and hide it from you. So that's basic human psychology. And I don't see how you could take wrong to that piece of criticism that anger is not the best way to go forward. Do we all get angry? Yeah. You can go through my show, watch this podcast, and find several instances of me just being so angry about what I'm reading, what I'm seeing, and it comes through with the way I communicate. And I will tell you that every single time it happens, I go, might have been a little too strong on that, and it might not come off the best way, because I always like to think about, what if somebody who totally disagrees with me watches that piece of what I just said, and that's the only thing they ever get to see? It's not going to move the needle.
Yeah, I think I'm not quite on the same page as you with all this. Like you said, I think you'll concede that anger is sometimes warranted in these issues when you see harm being done, and that causes anger. Anger is a just and appropriate reaction. It's part of being human.
Sure.
Now, how you use that anger in your reaction, you don't want that to overcome to where you become cruel, or you're trying now to inflict harm because of your anger in your statement. But a tone of anger in response to harm being inflicted on people is, to me, still in bounds, in the sense of this. I don't think in his statement rebutting Elliot Page, he was trying to persuade her. I think, or him, whatever.
Yeah, whatever. Yeah.
I don't know what will get us banned here, but I think he was saying, I am, again, like, feeling a sense of responsibility with my platform to speak out against something that I deem to be harmful and evil. And I'm angry about the effects that this is having on the world. So I'm going to respond and allow my anger to be known, because that is an appropriate response for what I am witnessing. Now, did he allow that anger to make him cross lines that he should not have crossed? I don't know. I don't think so. Unless allowing your tone to have anger is inherently problematic or wrong, or makes you inherently less effective, which I don't think it does. I do think it does if you're trying to have a reason. If you're sitting down with Elliot Page and you're trying to have a discussion, then that's where get the anger out of there. Have compassion. Lead with that. Try to get And I've seen Jordan in those situations. I think he would. But in this case, he's not. He's again speaking to her or about her as an avatar of the ideas that he's criticizing, and he's bringing that energy to his critique.
I'm curious how you feel about, let's use another Jordan Peterson example, the Sports Illustrated cover, where he responded. I think he tweeted at it and said, "Not beautiful." Right? Okay, so which is clearly that's not an.
Was that anger?
I would constitute that as being in the camp of. I don't know if you want to call it anger, but certainly like an annoyed, not with the intent of saying this is unhealthy and not something we should be promoting as a society, to go not beautiful. It's the same thing as looking at Elliot Page and going like, what you're doing is disgusting and you are leading to children dying. Okay, and you tweet that out at them instead of saying, this is not a healthy way to go about things. It's certainly not something we should be promoting to children due to the outcomes that children are going through. Which one is more effective? I would argue that saying Sports Illustrated should not be engaging in this sort of activity because it's unhealthy, because of this, because of that, is a lot more helpful and a lot more efficient and just going to be more successful than simply tweeting out not beautiful. You tweet out not beautiful and suddenly the whole conversation's about like Jordan Peterson calls this thing not beautiful, and it doesn't spark a debate really about the issue. It just becomes a personal attack on the girl who's on Sports Illustrated.
Yeah. I don't know if I would have tweeted that, because obviously that is a very,
it's a little malicious.
I wouldn't say malicious though, because
what would you characterize?
I would say
it's hard to find a better word.
He is putting his thumb on the exact spot of what is at the root of the debate. Right. Because what is at the root of that debate is the radical redefinition of beauty standards, of which are and the attempt to renormalize and reshape them around on an ideological basis. Whereas before, the traditional beauty standards have some roots in objective realities. And so he's bringing the objective into the debate and saying, as much as you guys want to try to redefine reality, I'm not letting you. I'm putting my thumb on the very bottom of this debate and saying and cutting through all of this. And that is the exact spot to hit the cultural nerve, because it did. And that's what the evidence of that is, the blow up around it.
But
and
it
so
didn't hit the cultural nerve in a positive way.
I don't necessarily agree with that. I think that creating that level of conversation, it's the society is uncomfortable with that truth that is beneath all of this ideology, and to just say zero in. And look, he didn't say he didn't name the person. You can interpret that how you want.
Yeah.
In my view, it was about the bigger debate about the reality of objective beauty standards, and their effort to radically redefine that by ideological people in these places.
Yeah, I guess. Yeah, keep.
And so, I mean, and I guess you could say that's a charitable interpretation of his tweet.
Right.
Whereas you could also say, no, he's being malicious and angry at this and just lashing out in that anger. And I guess this is where Twitter, being the platform that it is and having so few words to communicate complicated ideas, is leaves a lot of room for interpretation.
Right.
And would I have the willingness to put a message out there with that level of ambiguity that could be interpreted in that way?
Right.
Probably not.
Mm-hmm.
But do I think society should have people who do? Maybe.
Yeah, I don't know. This is where the divide. This is where the divide that we talked about at the beginning of the episode. Like Taylor's definitely more on the side of Jordan. I'm probably more on the side of Russell. Not in the overall debate or how we view gender.
We gotta put a poll in the chat where you guys are siding. I think they're loving this. You guys loving this?
I hope so, because
they're always like, you guys need to disagree more. You're always on the same page. So we're trying, guys.
We're not here. And yeah, I just think for somebody who, both of these men are seemingly very intentional with their words. Maybe in this interview a little less so for Jordan Peterson, or maybe he's intentional with his words in just a way that is not landing for me in particular. But that's these examples, I just think there are better ways to go about it. And this is something that we fall into. I've had several times on this show where I'll be like, oh, damn, I shouldn't have said it like that. And now it's already out there. It's live. It's done. We gave the harsh reaction right out of the gate, and it's out there. And if I had tweeted something like "not beautiful" at a Sports Illustrated cover for something, and by the way, I think that girl she's pretty hot. But anyways, I would have probably felt bad in post after that. And I just remember there was sort of a doubling down. But we'll continue. We're almost done with the video here.
Upsets me, and I see how you arm them. I feel that you arm them by sort of, in their language, dead naming Elliot Page. And I feel like why would you do that? It isn't necessary. Of course, it's the statistics you've cited about the Tavistock Clinic appear to speak for themselves. Mm-hmm. Is there a way that we can handle this that would be more akin to how we might imagine Christ would handle it? Otherwise, what's the point of Christianity? What's the point of Christianity if we're not going to embody Christ in our behavior?
Look, everybody who's operating in the online space that we're operating is trying to get the tone right? And you do that in part by paying attention to the audience. And you do that by trying to see how people are responding, and not in a way that's pandering, but in a way that's open and attentive. And it's a very difficult thing to get right. So the question you're asking is, well, when is anger appropriate? When is it not appropriate? When is it only inflammatory? That's a really hard question to answer, to get that balance between judgment and encouraging acceptance right. I suppose part of the problem is we don't know exactly how emotions scale in an online environment, right? And definitely I found that even when I'm delivering very cutting material, as I just wrote an article for The Telegraph on the upcoming privation that Europe is going to be facing in the rest of the world in the winter. And I tried to read it as calmly as I possibly could, even though it's extremely cutting. And the calm delivery seems to alienate fewer people and bring people in more than an angry delivery without any shift in semantic content. The right principle is probably something like minimal necessary force in your personal interactions and minimal necessary emotion in your online behavior. But it's hard to know exactly what that means. And it's not as if I think I've done it perfectly. I mean, you move like this towards that central line that hopefully is moving uphill.
What's entire...
It's interesting. So he never went after the direct thing, but that seems to have resonated with him what Russell had just said. And it is interesting because I just recently have been thinking about trying to put the things that I'm reading on social media into public conversations, at least as just sort of a thought experiment. Like, you go on Twitter, you see the Sports Illustrated cover, and you read Jordan Peterson says not beautiful, and it has 50,000 likes. I don't know how many likes it ended up getting, but it has thousands upon thousands of likes. And suddenly, in my brain, that not beautiful is more malicious than if I was walking through a grocery store with Jordan Peterson, and Jordan Peterson sees the Sports Illustrated cover, and he goes, not beautiful. seemingly that's him saying the same thing towards the same picture, towards the same magazine, but because we are in two separate environments, and like he said before, an environment that is directly amplified by what you choose to put out on the internet, it becomes worse. So it's weird, and he talks about the inhuman force of it all, because in a sense, what he said before is true. When Russell Brand says something, it is Russell Brand saying it, but it's also Russell Brand saying it to what? How many 6.04 million subscribers who love Russell Brand. And that does change it a little bit, at least in my mind, whether I did that subconsciously or consciously.
Yeah, I guess it's a question of like, like you said, minimal necessary force. I like that as a rule of thumb.
Right.
And then it's just a question of when is it warranted to use any force and to achieve what end? That's like, at what point does the end justify the means?
Mm-hmm.
So the means of putting out a tweet like that, what is the end that you are trying to achieve? And again, my charitable interpretation would say you're trying to fight back against the radical redefinition of society by ideologues. Right. You're putting your thumb on this something that's a very core part of that debate, and hopefully by doing that, you are causing people, by saying something that is so faux pas and so something that you should not be able to say, you are at least creating a conversation around this and causing people to investigate the merits of your claim or the merits of your argument, or if there's a there. That's going to cause a lot of emotional reaction. But if at the core of that, the facts are on your side, and you could say the same thing about the gender debate. If at the core the facts are on your side, then I think that again, minimal necessary force, it is possibly warranted.
It just seems like a sign of the times to me, because like when we talk about the gender debate, there are plenty of reasonable people that I can think of within the gender debate that I would love to be amplified to the same size as a Jordan Peterson or a Russell Brand. You got like the Colin Wrights of the world, you have the Deborah Sows of the world, who do not engage with anger for the most part and just put out what is factual information and research. However, people don't take to that, and they don't care. Yep. They want to see somebody like Jordan Peterson say, that's not a man, that's a woman. And that's what takes off. And then eventually through that rabbit hole, you find the researchers and what he's actually saying behind that one sentence comment. Now, would I prefer a world where the people who are level-headed and putting out these lengthy responses as to why this is not the right thing, those are the people elevated to that extent? Yes, I would prefer that. And I would prefer a detailed explanation about why maybe Sports Illustrated did this cover as to, the times of the culture and the place that we're in right now and the body positivity movement, rather than not beautiful. So we all have our preferences. Yeah. However, the internet gives way to the short structured, snappy, hardcore stance. And that's what leads people hopefully down the rabbit hole. But a lot of times I feel like it's just like, and then we move on with our day.
So you would say his comments would be more like using a clickbait headline. Yeah. In that sense. And we struggle with that on our content as well, is like, to what degree do we cover this story because it's going viral or whatever, or how do we phrase this headline? And we try it's a very fine line to skirt, as like how, intriguing, how much intrigue can we create without crossing the line of being like, okay, this is just straight up clickbait, because there's plenty of that out there. And a lot of it is building a brand by saying, when you come to actually listen to us, the meat's there. And I would say at least Jordan Peterson has had plenty of these conversations at length with the Colin Wrights and the Deborah Sows and people of that ilk. If you investigate Jordan Peterson and you listen to his hour-long podcasts and conversations with people, he's generally very fair and very respectful in his conversation. And if you had an hour-long conversation unpacking this tweet, you would find the bulk of it. You might disagree on the finer points, but the bulk of his position on the issue would not be something. But I did just want to one thing, because Russell said it and Jordan didn't address it, of invoking Jesus is an interesting one to me as a Christian, because it is true that Jesus is an avatar of compassion and like mercy, and those are in love, and those are qualities of Jesus. But people always want to like cherry pick who you want Jesus to be, and then you have to contend with the whole thing. And in Scripture, there's a story of him going to a temple where he sees religious Pharisees exploiting the regular common people who are coming to basically they're just overcharging them for money conversions and stuff. And he goes in, gets a whip, drives them out of the temple, and flips the tables and says, my Father's house should be a house of prayer, but you've turned it into a den of thieves. And why? That is a case of Jesus exhibiting justified anger and even violence to correct an injustice and to drive out the establishment who are exploiting people and causing harm. And so
there are examples.
Yes. So, and again, is that always the right way to respond? No.
Right.
But that's what's so complicated about this, is that you have to contend with both. We should be compassionate. There's plenty of examples of Jesus exhibiting compassion and mercy and love. But you have to contend with the other side too. And I think that reflects real life, because real life is like that. And we have to contend and try to find the line in these situations as well. Yeah. And so the blanket statements to me don't really work in either way. And that's why we have conversations. I think that's why a podcast like this is interesting, to try to find those and navigate it, and why this debate was so interesting.
Right. Very, very interesting. I'm curious to see where you guys land on this. Who do you agree with more? Is it Russell? Is it Jordan? Is it halfway in the center and you can see both sides? Let me know in the comments down below. Where am I leaning? Because I think Russell probably has very similar views on the whole gender debate, I want to lean towards the more compassionate thing, but also I don't know. Maybe I am dead in the middle, because I do think what Jordan talks about, love taking different forms, that is true. Do I think he tweeted out not beautiful because he loves the girl on the cover of Sports Illustrated and want to give her loving encouragement? No, I don't think that, and I will stand firm in that belief. I really do not. Yeah, I don't know. I'm leaning towards Russell in the that's where we want to end up. As far as the means that we need to utilize to get there now, maybe I lean towards Jordan. I don't know.
I mean, do I even have to say where I stand?
You lean towards Jordan.
Yeah, and that's not to say like I had no disagreement with him in this. I mean, I hate to be the person that we always joke and say, I don't know, I agree with everything he says. Yeah. So I don't agree with everything Jordan Peterson says. But in general, I don't think that he should not have sent that tweet in question on Elliot page or the Sports Illustrated thing. I think that on balance, they're probably helped us. So
yeah, well. And these two men are both very important figures in the public space, and are going to continue to be. And their messages are obviously resonating with people. I think it's wonderful that they've gotten together to have conversations, and hopefully we'll get into more of these. If you guys want us to react to more Russell v. Jordan Peterson, or Russell talking with Jordan Peterson, let us know in the comments down below. And again, let me know who you thought won this back and forth. And not even that there is something to be won. It's just a conversation. So, guys, let us know. Like, subscribe, click the notification bell to be notified every single time we post a video for you guys, and sign up for the Discord. The link is in the description down below. We have discussions about the show, and I'm sure they'll discuss this at length as well. Thank you guys so much for watching the main card event tonight. Good night.